My name is General Alexandra Mitchell, but to a shrinking few, I am still Alex. At 38, I became a name etched into the austere annals of American military history, one of a handful of women to ever wear 4 stars on her shoulders. Today, however, those stars felt less like symbols of achievement and more like armor against a betrayal so profound it threatened to breach defenses I had spent a lifetime building. I stood outside the grand auditorium at Fort Belvoir, the Virginia air thick with the scent of spring blossoms and hypocrisy. My Air Force dress uniform was a second skin, meticulously pressed, its dark blue fabric a canvas for the story of my life told in ribbons and medals. The Distinguished Service Medal, the Silver Star, 2 bronze stars, and the deep, solemn purple of the heart I earned when my Black Hawk went down in a storm of fire and sand in Afghanistan. I could still feel the phantom heat of the explosion, the sickening crunch of metal and bone. Each medal was a testament to blood given and sacrifices made. The irony was not a gentle literary device. It was a physical thing, a shard of shrapnel twisting in my gut, hot and serrated. I, the highest-ranking officer in my family, a celebrated national figure, was not on the guest list for my own brother's promotion ceremony. 20 years of relentless service. 4 stars bought with sleepless nights, missed holidays, and pieces of my soul I could never reclaim. A titanium rod holding my leg together. None of it was enough to get me past the registration table manned by 2 lieutenants young enough to be my children. Our story began, as it so often does in Virginia, in a house run by the ghost of the military-industrial complex. Our father, Colonel William Mitchell, was a man who saw the world in right angles and straight lines. He commanded our home with the same unyielding discipline he commanded his infantry units. Mornings were a ritual of inspection. Beds with hospital corners so sharp you could cut yourself, shoes polished to a black mirror, rooms organized with the ruthless efficiency of a barracks. It was a harsh crucible, but it forged us. In me, it forged steel. In my brother, James, 3 years my junior, it seemed to have forged something more brittle, something that looked like steel but would shatter under pressure. We were inseparable then, 2 sides of the same coin minted in our father's image. We were allies against the world, defending each other from bullies and building elaborate forts in the woods behind our house. Our favorite game was soldiers. Even then, the dynamic was set. I was the strategist, the little girl with an uncanny grasp of flanking maneuvers and diversionary tactics, sketching out campaigns in the dirt with a stick. Our most legendary operation was the rescue of a teddy bear named Sergeant Fluff from the enemy prison camp, of Old Man Hemlock's prized rose bushes. I orchestrated a 2-pronged attack. James created a diversion by accidentally launching a frisbee into the adjacent yard, while I executed a low-crawl approach from the rear, liberating the hostage. James was the executor, the brave warrior who charged into imaginary enemy lines with a fierce loyalty that I mistook for unbreakable love. "You 2 will make fine officers someday," our father would say, the words a rare currency of approval. For me, they were a destination, a future I ran toward with open arms. For James, I see now, they were a race he was already losing, and he resented me for setting the pace. I joined the Air Force at 18, a blur of buzzed hair and fierce determination. James, still 15, watched me leave from the bus station, his face a complex tapestry of pride, envy, and a competitive fire I was too young and too optimistic to recognize as dangerous. It wasn't just admiration. It was the look of someone watching their rival get a head start. My ascent was meteoric. What started as a path to a college degree became a calling. I possessed a natural aptitude for strategic thinking that flourished in the structured chaos of the military. I saw patterns where others saw noise, solutions where others saw dead ends. By 25, I was a captain, a veteran of my first deployment. 3 years after I enlisted, James followed, choosing the Army. For a time, our shared calling was a bond. We were the Mitchells, a legacy of service. We exchanged letters filled with the gallows humor of soldiers, celebrated promotions, and held each other up through the darkness that service inevitably brings. The first real crack appeared when I made major at 30. James was still a captain, his career respectable but not remarkable. I visited him at Fort Bragg, eager to celebrate. The air in the on-base pub was thick with cheap beer and the forced camaraderie of his fellow officers. "Congratulations, Major Mitchell," he'd said, raising a beer. His smile was a cheap counterfeit, his eyes cold as a winter morning on the rifle range. The officers around him echoed the sentiment, but their eyes flickered between us, sizing up the sibling dynamic. "You'll catch up soon," I'd assured him, utterly misreading the venom for anxiety. "Sure," he'd replied, taking a long swallow of his beer. "Though it seems you've always been one step ahead." It was not a complaint. It was an accusation delivered for the benefit of his audience. Our mother's death from cancer 5 years later should have healed the breach. For a fleeting moment, it did. Standing at her grave, we were just two grieving children. He held my hand as I delivered the eulogy, my voice steady only because his grip was there. Later that night, sharing a bottle of bourbon, a fragile truce emerged. "She was always so proud of you, Alex," he said, the sunrise painting our childhood home in hues of gold and sorrow. "Dad showed her every article, every citation." "She was proud of both of us," I corrected, my heart aching. "She kept your deployment maps, James." "She prayed over them every night." He just nodded, the fragile connection shattering into 1,000 pieces, replaced by the familiar, suffocating tension. My success wasn't a source of shared family pride. It was a personal affront to him. My career accelerated into realms previously unimagined for a woman. My expertise in cybersecurity and counterintelligence made me a key asset in the new wars being fought in the ether. I was promoted to Brigadier General at 34, one of the youngest in history. The notification of my promotion to 4-star general at 38 was a national event. I was a symbol, a trailblazer, a name on the lips of senators and news anchors. James sent a perfunctory email, citing operational commitments for his absence at the ceremony. I accepted it, blinded by a desperate, sisterly hope that I was wrong about the chasm growing between us. Then came the email announcing his promotion to colonel. A wave of pure, unadulterated pride washed over me, a reflex I couldn't control. My little brother, Colonel James Mitchell. I called him immediately, my voice brimming with an excitement he did not share. "Colonel James Mitchell, congratulations." "Thanks, Alex," he said, his voice measured, devoid of warmth. "When's the ceremony? I'll clear my schedule. I wouldn't miss it for the world." A beat of silence, a vacuum on the line. 3 weeks from Saturday, Fort Belvoir Auditorium. "I'll be there with bells on," I promised, already mentally dismantling my calendar. "You don't have to," he said, and the dismissiveness was unmistakable this time. "I know how busy you are with your responsibilities." I brushed it off. Pre-promotion jitters. Nothing would keep me away. I moved heaven and earth. 3 high-level briefings with the Joint Chiefs were rescheduled. A meeting with a foreign delegation was postponed, and my deputy was assigned to a security conference in my stead. It was a logistical nightmare, but it was for James. I spent 2 weeks preparing, my aide, Lieutenant Samantha Rogers, helping me polish every metal until it blazed. I found the perfect gift, a handcrafted shadow box of dark cherry wood with a brass plate to be engraved with Colonel James Mitchell, continuing a legacy of honor. The evening before the ceremony, my father called. His voice was grim. "Alexandra, I'm concerned. James has fallen in with a certain crowd. Old guard types. General Walter Harrington, specifically. They resent your modernization initiatives. They see you as a political appointment, not a soldier. Be careful." General Harrington. A 3-star dinosaur known for his backroom dealings and staunch opposition to everything I represented. Progress, integration, a military based on merit, not gender. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces began to click into a horrifying picture. "Dad," I'd said, a foolish optimism still clinging to me. "We're family. This is a celebration." "I hope you're right," he'd replied, his voice heavy with doubt. "But prepare yourself." I didn't listen. I fell asleep dreaming of our childhood, of a bond I believed was forged in something stronger than ambition. Now, standing outside that auditorium, the full weight of my naivete crushed me. The polite but firm rejection by the junior officers was the opening salvo. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your name doesn't appear on any of the guest lists." I maintained my composure, a lifetime of training kicking in. "That must be an administrative error. I am Colonel Mitchell's sister." The pained look on the young lieutenant's face told me everything. This was no error. Through the open doors, I saw him, James, surrounded by other officers, his new colonel's eagles gleaming on his shoulders. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the crowded foyer. There was no surprise, no concern. There was only a flicker of cold triumph before he deliberately turned his back on me, laughing at something one of his colleagues said. That single, calculated movement was a declaration of war. The world seemed to slow down. The polite murmur of the crowd, the distant strains of a string quartet, the pained face of the event coordinator, Major Peterson, who confirmed the obvious. "I've checked all records, General. Your name was not included on any list submitted by Colonel Mitchell." Humiliation, hot and sharp, pierced my armor. This wasn't a snub, it was a public execution. He hadn't just failed to invite me. He had arranged for me to be turned away, to be shamed in front of his peers and my subordinates. Every curious glance from a passing officer felt like a physical blow. The gift box in my hand felt impossibly heavy, a monument to my own foolish heart. A tactical retreat was the only option. "That won't be necessary," I said to the security officers who had begun to gather, my voice a marvel of control. "Please carry on." I walked back to my car, each step an exercise in suppressing a rage so pure it threatened to consume me. I didn't go to a bench. I got in my vehicle, the sterile interior a welcome refuge. And there, alone, I let the mask crack. Memories assaulted me, not of childhood games, but of sacrifices. The 3 weeks of my own leave I'd spent tutoring him for his West Point entrance exams. The time I'd pulled strings with a battalion commander, I knew to get a minor infraction expunged from his early record, an infraction that could have derailed his career before it began. The countless times I defended him, telling senior officers that yes, he had earned it, that he wasn't riding my coattails. And this was his repayment. To be used as a pawn in some petty political game by Harrington and his cronies. To be publicly disowned. My phone rang. It was my father, his voice tight with fury. "I'm in the auditorium. Where are you?" "Apparently," I said, my own voice dangerously calm, "I wasn't invited." A long, heavy silence. "Harrington is here," he finally said. "In the front row like a king holding court. This is his doing, Alexandra. He's using your brother to send a message." The last vestiges of the wounded sister evaporated, burned away by a cold, clarifying fire. The general took her place. This was no longer a family drama. This was an insurrection. It was a challenge to my authority, to the uniform, to the very principles of order and respect that held the military together. And insurrections must be crushed, swiftly, decisively. "What will you do?" my father asked, knowing that tone in my voice. "I'm going to remind them," I said, "what 4 stars mean." I ended the call and sat for 5 minutes, not in sorrow, but in strategic planning. The mission objective was clear: re-establish the chain of command, neutralize the threat, and make an example of those who would mistake my gender for weakness or my familial love for a vulnerability. My first call was to my aide. "Sam, I need my ceremonial uniform, full regalia, and my citation portfolio. Meet me at the coffee shop just off base. 15 minutes. Sam, unflappable as ever, simply replied, "On my way, General." She knew this was more than a wardrobe change. It was a call to arms. The ceremonial uniform wasn't just dressier, it was a declaration. It was the history of my service worn on my chest. My second call was to General Marcus Williams, the presiding officer, a man I'd pulled from a burning Humvee under fire in Fallujah. We shared a bond forged in chaos and blood. "Marcus, it's Alex Mitchell. I have a situation." I explained it concisely. His response was a low growl of anger. "That is an outrageous breach of protocol, Alex." "What do you need?" "Nothing, Marcus, just your awareness. I will handle this myself." He understood. This required my hand, and my hand alone. My final call was to the base commander. He was audibly shocked and immediately assured me I would have unrestricted access upon my return. In the restroom of a sterile coffee shop, I transformed. I shed the standard dress blues and donned the full ceremonial uniform. It was heavier, weighted with the physical symbols of my life. I didn't just see medals, I felt them. The silver star, a reminder of the day I'd pulled those 2 wounded soldiers from that burning vehicle, the smell of charred flesh seared into my memory. The Purple Heart sat over my right pocket, a quiet testament to the shrapnel still embedded near my spine that ached on cold nights. The 4 silver stars on my shoulder board seemed to gather the light, shining with an almost violent intensity. Looking in the mirror, I was no longer Alex Mitchell, the hurt older sister. I was General Mitchell, an instrument of the United States military, and I was about to perform my duty. I drove back to Fort Belvoir with a singular, chilling purpose. The ceremony would be well underway. My timing had to be perfect, not disruptive, but unignorable. The guards at the gate snapped to attention, their eyes widening at the spectacle of a 4-star general in full ceremonial dress arriving alone. They waved me through to a reserved spot right beside the auditorium's officer entrance, where a nervous-looking major was waiting to escort me. He led me to a side door. I could hear the applause from within, signaling the completion of the formal pinning of James's new rank. He was now at the podium, beginning his acceptance speech. Perfect. The major opened the door, and I stepped inside. A wave of silence rolled from the back of the auditorium to the front, extinguishing the polite murmur of the crowd. It was a physical force, a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. 300 heads turned. On the stage, James faltered, his words dying in his throat. His face went pale as he saw me, a specter of honor and retribution standing at the back of the room. I did not stop. With the measured, deliberate pace of a funeral procession, I walked down the center aisle. My medals chimed softly, a funereal bell tolling for my brother's career, the only sound in the cavernous, silent hall. A young captain in a front row seat shot to his feet as if electrocuted, offering his chair. I gave him a slight, gracious nod and sat, directly in my brother's line of sight, my back ramrod straight, my eyes locked on his. For a terrifying 10 seconds, he was paralyzed, a rabbit in the high beams. To his credit, the soldier in him took over. He fumbled through the remainder of his speech, his voice tight, his words hollow. He spoke of honoring the traditions and structures that made the military great, a pathetic, pre-scripted jab at me that now sounded like the desperate squeak of a mouse challenging a lion. When he finished, a smattering of confused applause broke the tension. General Williams then rose to give the closing remarks. He surveyed the room, his eyes finding mine. There was a glint of steel in them. "Before we conclude," he announced, his voice booming through the auditorium, "I see we are graced with the presence of a distinguished and, it seems, unexpected guest. A leader who embodies the very best of our modern military. General Alexandra Mitchell, would you honor us with a few words?" It was a masterful move, a public coronation that simultaneously acknowledged and condemned the slight against me. A collective gasp went through the room. James's face was a mask of horror. His smug satisfaction had been replaced by sheer panic. He had wanted a day without my shadow. I was about to eclipse his sun. I rose and ascended the stage. We passed on the steps, so close I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. I gave him a nod so cold it could have frozen water. At the podium, I surveyed the room. I saw the faces of young officers, watching, learning. I saw my father in the front row, his face a mixture of fierce pride and sorrow. And I saw General Harrington, whose smug expression had curdled into the slack-jawed alarm of a man who had just watched his prize racehorse break a leg at the starting gate. "Thank you, General Williams." My voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the room. "It is an honor to be here to witness this milestone in Colonel Mitchell's career." I turned my head slightly, my gaze sweeping over James before locking onto Harrington. "Our father, Colonel William Mitchell, retired, taught us that the uniform we wear is a sacred trust. It is a symbol not of personal ambition, but of selfless service. It demands integrity, not just on the battlefield, but in the quiet corridors of power where character is truly tested. It demands respect for the chain of command, a principle that is the very bedrock of our institution. A breach of that respect, for any reason, be it personal resentment or political maneuvering, is a poison. It weakens the foundation of everything we swear to defend." I let the words hang in the air, each one a perfectly aimed shot. "True leadership," I continued, my eyes still boring into Harrington, "is not found in echo chambers of self-congratulation. It is forged in the courage to stand for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable. It embraces progress not as a threat to tradition, but as the only way for tradition to survive. On behalf of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I congratulate Colonel Mitchell. May his service moving forward be a testament to the highest ideals this uniform represents." The applause was thunderous, a release of the tension that had gripped the room. It was not for James. It was for me. As I walked off the stage, the power dynamic in the room had been irrevocably altered. Harrington looked like he had been poleaxed. In the reception hall, I was the center of a new gravity. Officers who had been fawning over James and Harrington now sought me out. But I had one more objective. I found my father. "I need to speak with him. Alone." He nodded grimly and located a small, unused conference room, directing a stone-faced James to meet me there. When the door closed, the silence was absolute. The 4 stars on my shoulders and the silver eagles on his felt like opposing armies. "Is this what you wanted, James?" I began, my voice dangerously soft. A day all to yourself. You wanted to be in charge, to stand in the spotlight without my shadow. Well, look at you now. You're a colonel and you're a fool. You don't understand, he stammered, the bravado gone. Living under you, the constant comparison. Did you think these stars were a gift? The words tore out of me, raw and furious. That they were handed to me in some diversity bake sale. I sacrificed for you. I covered for you. I championed you. I defended you. I have fought and bled for this uniform, for the right to wear these stars. And you let that snake Harrington use you to spit on all of it. To spit on me. For what? So you could feel like a big man for a day. I stepped closer, my presence seeming to suck the air from the room. You didn't just disrespect your sister, you disrespected a superior officer. You committed an act of profound insubordination, and you did it publicly. You allowed your petty insecurities to make you a traitor to the very code we live by. He flinched as if struck. I wasn't finished. I placed the gift-wrapped shadow box on the table between us with a soft, final thud. I got you this, I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. The plate inside was meant to be engraved, continuing a legacy of honor, a legacy you have disgraced today. Your actions, your weakness, have demonstrated a catastrophic lapse in judgment. You have proven yourself susceptible to poisonous influences and utterly unfit for a command in this political climate. He looked up, confused. What are you saying? I'm saying that after my little speech, I had a brief, private conversation with General Williams. I mentioned my deep concerns about your judgment and your recent choice of mentors. I recommended that your next posting be reevaluated for the good of the service. You need to be somewhere you can't be used as a political pawn, somewhere you can remember what being a soldier is actually about. He agreed. Your orders are being changed. You're going to Fort Lewis, effective immediately. You can thank General Harrington for the promotion, and you can thank him for the transfer to the end of the world. The color drained from his face. Fort Lewis, in Washington state. A professional backwater, a place where promising careers went to die a slow, cold, rainy death. It was the ultimate checkmate. Not a petty act of revenge, but a command decision. I was removing a compromised piece from the board. You can't do that, he whispered, his voice cracking. I already have, I said, turning to leave. I paused at the door, my back to him. Congratulations on your promotion, Colonel. You have a long, long road ahead of you to prove you deserve it. I left the gift on the table. A silent, damning indictment of the man he had failed to become. The aftermath was swift and silent. General Harrington was quietly passed over for his 4th star. A carefully worded after-action report I filed regarding the unusual command climate at Fort Belvoir, combined with an anonymous tip to a trusted journalist about potential political factionalism, led to a formal inquiry. He was shunted into an early retirement 6 months later, his legacy tainted. My revenge was not loud or emotional. It was a strategic, bloodless coup, executed with the precision of a drone strike. Months later, a letter arrived at my Pentagon office. The postmark was from Washington state. It was from James. It was not an apology so much as a confession, the words of a man who had been broken down and was slowly, painfully, rebuilding himself from the foundations. He understood, finally, what he had done, the magnitude of his weakness. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I never replied. My victory wasn't in his remorse, but in my own unassailable integrity. The next time I saw him was a year later during an official inspection at Fort Lewis. The air was cold, the sky a permanent, dreary gray. He was leaner, harder, his eyes clear for the first time in years. He stood at attention as I approached, and he saluted me, his superior officer. It was crisp, correct, and devoid of anything but professional respect. The war was over. I had won. Not just the battle, but the principle. I had stood my ground, and in doing so, I had redefined the battlefield itself. And that was a revenge far sweeter than any simple family reconciliation could ever be.